Jake Morrison walked across his farm as the sun began to set. The October air was cold, and he pulled his jacket tighter around his body. He had lived in Montana for 15 years now, working the same land his grandfather once owned. The farm was small, but it was his. He grew vegetables, kept some goats, and had about 30 chickens that gave him eggs to sell in town. Life had changed 3 years ago when aliens arrived on Earth. Real aliens, not the kind from movies. The government called it first contact. Ships came down from the sky, and beings from other worlds walked on Earth for the first time. Jake remembered watching it on television, hardly believing his eyes. The Galactic Federation, they called themselves. A group of alien species that traveled the stars together. At first everyone was scared, but the aliens said they came in peace. They wanted to trade, to share knowledge, to be friends. The government made rules about where aliens could go and what they could do. Most stayed in big cities where special zones were built for them. Out here in rural Montana, Jake rarely saw any aliens at all. That was fine with him. He liked the quiet life. He liked his chickens and his garden and the mountains in the distance. He did not need excitement, but tonight something was wrong. Jake could feel it. His chickens were too quiet. Usually they made noise when the sun went down, settling in for the night. Tonight there was only silence. Jake grabbed his flashlight from the porch and walked toward the chicken coop. His boots crunched on the gravel path. The coop was a small wooden building with wire mesh on the windows. He had built it himself 5 years ago. It kept the chickens safe from foxes and coyotes. He opened the door slowly. The hinges creaked. Jake shined his flashlight inside, expecting to see his chickens roosting on their perches. But something was different. The chickens were all crowded on one side of the coop, pressed together like they were afraid. Jake stepped inside and swept the flashlight across the space. That was when he saw it. In the corner, behind the wooden nesting boxes, something moved. His heart jumped. For a second, he thought it might be a coyote that got inside. But then the light caught it fully, and Jake stopped breathing. It was not a coyote. It was not any animal he knew. It was an alien. She was crouched in the corner, making herself as small as possible. Her skin was a blue-gray color that seemed to glow faintly in the flashlight beam. She had a thin body, arms and legs that looked almost human but not quite. Her head was larger than a human's and her eyes were huge and dark, reflecting the light like a cat's eyes at night. But what made Jake's chest tighten was what she held in her arms. 2 smaller aliens, clearly children. They could not have been very old. They pressed against their mother, shaking with fear. The mother alien did not run. She just stared at Jake. Her large eyes were filled with terror, but also something else, desperation. She was holding her children so tightly, her whole body curved around them like a shield. Jake knew he should call the patrol. That was the law. When aliens showed up where they were not supposed to be, you called the authorities. They would come and take the aliens away, figure out where they came from and what they were doing. People who helped illegal aliens could go to jail. The government did not joke about this. They made examples of people who broke the rules. Jake's phone was in his pocket. He could call right now. It would be easy. It would be the safe thing to do. But he looked at the mother alien holding her babies. He looked at how thin they were, how their clothes were torn and dirty. He looked at the scratches on their skin and the way they trembled. And he thought about his own mother. She had died when he was 12, but he remembered how she always helped people. When neighbors needed food, she shared what they had. When someone was in trouble, she was the first one there. She used to say that rules were important, but kindness was more important. The alien mother was still staring at him. She had not moved. She was waiting to see what he would do. Jake slowly lowered his flashlight so it was not shining in her eyes. He took a step back, giving her more space. The mother's eyes followed him, confused. "It's okay," Jake said softly, though he had no idea if she could understand him. "I'm not going to hurt you." He took another step back. Then another. The alien mother's expression changed slightly. The terror was still there, but now there was something that looked like hope. Jake reached the door of the chicken coop. He paused and looked back at the 3 aliens huddled in the corner. The children were so small. One of them looked sick, its skin duller than the mother's. "Stay here," Jake said. "I'll be back. I promise." He did not know if she understood his words, but maybe she understood his tone. He tried to sound calm, reassuring, like he was talking to a scared animal. Jake closed the door gently and walked back to his house. His mind was racing. What was he doing? This was crazy. These were illegal aliens on his property. He could lose everything. The farm, his freedom, everything. But he could not call the patrol. He just could not do it. Inside his house, Jake turned on the lights and went to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and looked inside. He had leftover stew from yesterday, some bread, apples, milk. He grabbed containers and started pulling things out. He heated the stew on the stove and made sandwiches with thick slices of bread and cheese. He filled a thermos with hot tea. He found some old blankets in the closet, the kind he used for camping. He grabbed his medical kit too, the one with bandages and antiseptic. Jake loaded everything onto a tray and carried it outside. The walk to the chicken coop felt longer this time. His heart was pounding. What if she attacked him? What if this was a trap? What if other aliens were hiding nearby? But he kept walking. When he reached the coop, he balanced the tray on one arm and opened the door. The alien mother had not moved. She was still in the corner with her children. Her eyes went wide when she saw the tray of food. Jake stepped inside slowly. He walked about halfway across the coop and set the tray down on the ground. Then he backed away to the far wall and sat down on an overturned bucket. "Go ahead," he said, gesturing to the food. "You can eat it." The alien mother stared at the tray. She looked at Jake, then back at the tray. She seemed confused, like she did not understand why he was doing this. Slowly, carefully, she set one of her children down on the ground. The child stayed pressed against the wall, watching with those huge dark eyes. The mother reached out with a 3-fingered hand and picked up a piece of bread. She sniffed it, turning it over in her fingers. Then she took a small bite. She chewed slowly, cautiously. When nothing bad happened, she tore off a piece and gave it to one of her children. Then another piece for the other child. Soon all 3 of them were eating. They ate like they had not seen food in days. Maybe they had not. Jake watched them, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Fear, because this was dangerous. Pity, because they were clearly suffering. And something else. Something that felt right. When the children had eaten their fill, they curled up against their mother. The mother wrapped her arms around them and looked at Jake again. This time there was no fear in her eyes. Just gratitude. She pressed her hand to her chest. "Kira," she said. Her voice was soft and musical, not quite human, but beautiful in its own way. Jake understood. She was telling him her name. He pressed his own hand to his chest. "Jake," he said. Kira nodded slowly. She pointed to one child. Nix, then the other. "Sarah," Jake smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kira." Nix, Sarah. Kira's expression softened. For the first time, she looked almost peaceful. She pulled her children closer and closed her eyes. Jake stood up quietly and picked up the empty tray. He left the blankets and walked to the door. Before he stepped outside, he looked back one more time. Kira was watching him. She nodded once, a small gesture of thanks. Jake nodded back and closed the door behind him. As he walked back to his house in the dark, he knew his life had just changed forever. He had broken the law. He had sheltered illegal aliens. And he would do it again tomorrow. Jake barely slept that night. He kept thinking about the 3 aliens in his chicken coop. What if they got too cold? What if someone saw them? What if they left during the night? When the sun came up, he made breakfast for himself but could not eat much. His stomach was tight with worry. He made extra food and loaded it onto another tray. More bread, some eggs he had cooked, fresh water, and fruit from his kitchen. He walked to the chicken coop, expecting it to be empty. Maybe Kira and her children had run away during the night. Maybe they did not trust him. But when he opened the door, they were still there. All 3 of them were wrapped in the blankets he had left, huddled together for warmth. Kira's eyes opened when she heard the door. She sat up quickly, putting herself between Jake and her children. But when she saw it was him, she relaxed slightly. "Good morning," Jake said. He set the tray down and stepped back like before. "I brought breakfast." Kira reached for the food. This time she did not hesitate as much. She gave food to Nix and Sarah first, making sure they ate before she took anything for herself. Jake noticed this. She was a good mother. While they ate, Jake looked at them more carefully in the daylight. Their clothes were in terrible shape, barely holding together. The children had cuts and bruises on their arms and legs. Sarah, the smaller one, had a bad cough that made her whole body shake. "You need medicine," Jake said, pointing to Sarah. "She's sick." Kira looked worried. She touched Sarah's forehead and said something in her own language. It sounded like clicking and whistling mixed together, nothing like any language Jake had heard before. Jake had an idea. He held up one finger, the universal sign for wait, and left the coop. He went back to his house and searched through his medicine cabinet. He found children's fever medicine, cough syrup, and antibiotics left over from when his nephew visited last year. He grabbed all of it. When he returned, he showed the bottles to Kira. He pointed to Sarah, then to the medicine, then made a drinking motion. Kira watched him carefully. She seemed to understand he was trying to help, but she looked uncertain. Jake opened the fever medicine and poured a small amount into the cap. He held it out to Kira. "For Sarah," he said. "It will help." Kira took the cap and sniffed it. She dipped one finger in and tasted it, testing whether it was safe. After a moment, she gave it to Sarah. The little girl drank it and made a face at the taste, but she did not spit it out. "Good," Jake said, smiling. "That's good." He spent the next hour trying to communicate with Kira. It was hard without a shared language, but they managed. Jake pointed to objects and said their names in English. Kira repeated the words, her accent strange but her memory sharp. She learned the words for blanket, water, food, and medicine quickly. Then Kira started teaching Jake. She pointed to herself and said words in her language. She drew pictures in the dirt floor of the coop, showing him symbols and shapes. Jake tried to copy the sounds she made, but his mouth could not form some of them. The clicking noises were especially hard. Kira seemed amused by his attempts. It was the first time Jake saw her smile, and it changed her whole face. She looked less alien when she smiled, more like just another person trying to survive. Over the next few days, they built a routine. Jake would bring food 3 times a day. He brought more blankets, a battery-powered heater, and a bucket of water for washing. He cleaned out one corner of the coop and made it more comfortable, like a small room. The chickens got used to sharing their space. At first, they had been nervous, but Kira was gentle with them. She never chased them or made loud noises. Nix liked watching the chickens. He would sit very still and observe them for hours. On the 4th day, Kira started helping Jake with the farm work. She followed him outside early in the morning before anyone could see her. She was strong despite her thin frame, and she learned quickly. She helped him feed the goats and collect eggs. She watched how he repaired a fence and then helped him finish the job. While they worked, Kira taught Jake more words. She pointed to the sky and said a word that sounded like shala. She pointed to the ground and said teka. She pointed to herself and her children and said Valen. Jake understood. Valen was what her people were called. That evening, after the children were asleep, Kira and Jake sat in the coop with a lantern between them. Kira picked up a stick and started drawing in the dirt. She drew a circle which Jake guessed was a planet. Her planet. She drew stick figures of people, lots of them. Then she drew what looked like ships, aggressive and sharp. She drew the ships attacking the people. Jake's stomach sank. "War?" he asked. Kira nodded. She said a word in her language that sounded harsh and angry. Then she pointed to the ships in her drawing. She drew more pictures showing herself running with her children. She drew a small ship, then showed it breaking apart. She pointed to the ground. Earth. Jake understood now. Kira and her children were refugees. Their world had been attacked and they escaped. But their ship crashed when they got to Earth. They had been surviving on their own ever since, hiding and scared. "How long?" Jake asked, holding up fingers. "How many days?" Kira held up both hands, showing all her fingers multiple times. "More than 20 days. Almost a month they had been hiding, cold and hungry." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Not at Kira, but at the situation. These were innocent people running from war. They needed help. But the Earth government would not care about that. They would see illegal aliens and lock them up while they did paperwork for months or even years. "You're safe here," Jake said firmly. He did not know if she understood all his words, but he hoped she understood his meaning. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Kira looked at him with those large dark eyes. Then she did something that surprised him. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. Jake felt a strange sensation, like a warm wave washing over him. It was not physical exactly. It was more like a feeling deep in his chest. Gratitude. Trust. Relief. Kira pulled her hand back and touched her own chest, right over where her heart would be. She said something in her language, soft and serious. Jake did not know what the words meant, but he felt their importance. It was a thank you, but more than that. It was a promise or a bond, something meaningful in her culture. "You're welcome," Jake said simply. The next morning, Jake made a decision. The chicken coop was not good enough. Winter was coming, and Montana winters were brutal. The little heater he had brought would not be enough when temperatures dropped below freezing. The children needed better shelter. They needed real protection. He found Kira cleaning the coop. She had found an old broom and was sweeping carefully, trying to keep their space tidy. Jake waited until she looked at him. "Tonight," he said, pointing to the house. "You come inside. All of you." Kira's eyes widened. She looked uncertain. Jake pointed to Nix and Sarah, who were playing quietly in the corner. He mimed shivering and being cold. Then he pointed to his house and made a gesture like being warm and comfortable. Kira hesitated. She looked at the house, then back at the coop. Jake could see her thinking, weighing the risks. Going into the house meant being more visible, more vulnerable. But staying in the coop meant her children would suffer through the cold. Finally, Kira nodded. She touched Jake's arm again, and he felt that warm sensation once more. This time it felt like acceptance mixed with a little fear. "Tonight," Jake repeated, "when it's dark and no one can see." That evening, after the sun set completely, Jake led Kira and her children from the coop to his house. He had checked to make sure no cars were on the road and no neighbors were outside. The nearest house was 2 miles away, but he could not be too careful. Inside, Jake showed them to the spare bedroom. It had a real bed, a closet, and a window with curtains. Kira stood in the doorway, looking around like she could not believe it was real. Sarah ran to the bed and climbed on it, bouncing slightly. She laughed, and it was the first time Jake had heard either child make a happy sound. Nix followed his sister, more cautious but clearly excited. Kira turned to Jake with tears in her large eyes. She said something in her language, her voice shaking with emotion. Jake did not need a translation to understand. She was thanking him for giving her children safety and comfort. "It's okay," Jake said gently. "You're home now. You're all home." Kira pressed her hand to her chest again, that gesture that meant something important. Then she pressed her hand to Jake's chest right over his heart. And Jake understood. In her culture, this was how you became family. Not by blood, but by choice. By standing together when it mattered. By protecting each other. He placed his own hand over hers and nodded. Outside, the Montana night was cold and full of stars. But inside the small farmhouse, 4 people from different worlds sat together in the warm light. No longer strangers, but something more. Something that might just save them all. 2 weeks passed, and life settled into a strange new normal. Kira and her children stayed hidden during the day when Jake had to go into town, or when delivery trucks came by. But in the mornings and evenings, they moved freely around the house, and the place felt less empty than it had in years. Jake had lived alone since his divorce 8 years ago. His ex-wife had wanted city life, wanted excitement and opportunity. She could not stand the quiet farm and the slow pace. After she left, Jake had convinced himself he liked being alone. But now, with Kira and the children there, he realized how lonely he had actually been. Sarah's cough got better with the medicine. Her skin grew brighter, more like her mother's healthy glow. Nick started talking more, his voice high and musical. He followed Jake everywhere, curious about everything. How did the water come from the tap? What made the lights turn on? Why did the goats make that sound? Jake tried to answer, using simple words and lots of gestures. Nix was smart. He picked up English faster than his mother, the way children always learned languages quicker. Kira surprised Jake with how much she knew. She understood numbers and could do math in her head faster than he could. She learned to use the stove and started cooking meals, mixing human food with techniques from her own world. The results were strange, but usually good. She made bread that was fluffy and sweet, nothing like the bread Jake bought from the store. One evening, Jake found Kira staring at his old radio. She was turning the dial slowly, listening to the different stations. Music, news, talk shows. Her face showed wonder and confusion. "You like music?" Jake asked. Kira nodded. "Music is important," she said in careful English. "All Valen love music. We sing to remember. We sing to teach children. We sing to say goodbye." She looked sad when she said that last part. Jake understood. She had probably sung goodbye to many people when her world was destroyed. "Can you sing something?" Jake asked. "Something from your world?" Kira hesitated. Then she nodded and began to sing. Her voice was unlike anything Jake had heard before. It rose and fell in patterns that did not quite match human music, with clicking sounds woven between the notes. It was strange and beautiful and sad all at once. When she finished, tears ran down her face. Nix and Sarah came running from the other room and hugged their mother. They had understood what the song meant even if Jake had not. "That was beautiful," Jake said softly. "Thank you for sharing it." Kira wiped her eyes. "It is song of home, of place we cannot go back to." The weight of that hit Jake hard. She could never go home. Her world was gone or taken over. Everything she knew, everyone she loved except her children, all of it was lost. "I'm sorry," Jake said. He did not know what else to say. Kira looked at him with those large eyes. "You give us new home. That is enough." But Jake knew it was not enough. Not really. They could not stay hidden in his house forever. Eventually, someone would find out. A neighbor would see something. A drone would fly over at the wrong time. The patrol checked farms randomly, looking for illegal activity. It was only a matter of time. He needed to figure out what to do. But what? The legal refugee process took months and required paperwork that Kira did not have. Her ship had been destroyed in the crash. She had no identification, no proof of where she came from. The government would assume she was lying or hiding something. Jake started researching online late at night after everyone was asleep. He read about refugee laws and alien immigration policies. Most of what he found was depressing. The system was designed to be slow and difficult. It kept people trapped in processing centers that were more like prisons. There had to be another way. Someone who could help. But who? During the day, Jake taught Kira more about Earth and human culture. She was fascinated by everything. She asked questions about why humans did things certain ways. Why did they shake hands? Why did they say bless you when someone sneezed? Why did they celebrate birthdays? In return, Kira taught Jake about the Valen. She explained that her people were empaths. They could feel emotions from others, not read minds exactly, but sense feelings. That was how she had known Jake would not hurt them that first night in the chicken coop. She had felt his compassion. "Can you feel what I'm feeling now?" Jake asked. Kira tilted her head, concentrating. "You are worried about us, about what happens next, but also happy." "You like having us here?" Jake laughed. "You're right. That's exactly how I feel. Most humans cannot feel others this way," Kira said. "Must be lonely." Jake had never thought about it like that, but she was right. Humans spent so much time trying to guess what others felt, trying to read facial expressions and tone of voice. The Velen just knew. "Do Nix and Sarah have this ability too?" Jake asked. "Yes, but children feel stronger. Too much sometimes. When Sarah was baby, she cried when anyone near her was sad. She felt their sadness like it was her own." That explained why the children had seemed so scared and hurt when Jake first found them. They had been feeling everyone's fear and pain around them, including their mother's terror. One afternoon, Jake had to go into town for supplies. He told Kira to keep the curtains closed and stay quiet. He would be back in a few hours. While he was at the hardware store, he ran into Father Peter from the local church. Jake did not go to church often, but he knew the priest. Everyone in the small town knew each other. "Jake Morrison," Father Peter said warmly. "Haven't seen you in a while. How's the farm?" "Good, Father. Keeping busy." Father Peter was an older man with kind eyes and gray hair. He had been the town priest for 20 years. "You know, if you ever need anything, my door is always open. The church helps those in need, no questions asked." Something in the way he said it made Jake pause. No questions asked. Could he mean what Jake thought he meant? "What kind of help?" Jake asked carefully. Father Peter smiled. "All kinds. Food, shelter, documentation. We believe in helping people, especially those who have nowhere else to turn." Their eyes met, and Jake saw understanding there. Father Peter knew something, or at least suspected. "I'll remember that," Jake said. "You do that," Father Peter replied. "And Jake? Sometimes the law and what's right are not the same thing. We answer to a higher authority." Jake drove home with his mind racing. Could Father Peter help? Could he be trusted? Jake did not have many options. He needed to take the risk. That evening he told Kira about the conversation. "There might be someone who can help us. A priest in town. But I need to be sure before I tell him about you." Kira nodded slowly. "I trust you." "You decide." The next day Jake went back to town and found Father Peter at the church. They sat in an empty pew and Jake told him everything. The alien mother and her children. The war they escaped from. The crash, the weeks of hiding, his decision to help them. Father Peter listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, the priest was quiet for a long moment. "What you did was brave," Father Peter finally said. "And right. But you're in danger now. If the patrol finds out, you'll lose everything." "I know," Jake said, "but I can't turn them over." "I won't," Father Peter smiled. "I'm not asking you to. I'm saying there's a network. People who believe refugees deserve safety. We help them get proper documentation through channels that actually work. It takes time, but it's legal and it's safe." "How long?" Jake asked. 3 to 4 months usually. We have contacts in the Federation who fast-track legitimate refugee cases. They check backgrounds, verify stories, make sure everything is proper, but they do it with compassion, not suspicion. Relief washed over Jake. "Can you help us?" "I can," Father Peter said. "But Kira will need to come here and tell me her story directly. I need to assess the situation myself. Can you bring her tomorrow night? After dark?" Jake nodded. "Yes, thank you, Father." "Don't thank me yet. This is dangerous work, but it's God's work and I'm happy to do it." That night, Jake told Kira about the plan. She was nervous but hopeful. "This priest, he is good man?" she asked. "Yes," Jake said. "I believe he is." Kira placed her hand on Jake's arm and he felt that warm sensation again. This time it felt like trust mixed with fear and hope all together. The next evening after dark, Jake drove Kira to the church. He left Nix and Sarah at home with blankets and food and instructions to hide if anyone came to the door. The drive was tense. Every car that passed made Jake's heart race. Every light in the distance could be a patrol vehicle. But they made it to the church without incident. Father Peter was waiting in his office, a small room filled with books and warm lamplight. When Kira walked in, Father Peter stood and smiled. "Welcome," he said gently. "I'm Father Peter, you must be Kira." Kira nodded, nervous. She looked at Jake and he gave her an encouraging smile. For the next hour, Kira told her story. Father Peter asked questions, took notes, and listened with complete attention. He asked about her world, the attack, her escape, the crash. He asked about her children, their ages, their health. He never seemed doubtful or suspicious. He just wanted to understand. Finally, he set down his pen and looked at Kira. "I believe you," he said simply. "And I will help you. But you need to understand this will take time. The process is not fast." "How long?" Kira asked. 3 months, maybe 4. Maybe longer if there are complications. "Can you stay hidden that long?" Kira looked at Jake. He nodded. "We'll manage," he said. "Good," Father Peter said. "I'll start the paperwork tomorrow. In the meantime, you stay where you are and keep out of sight. Jake, you keep doing what you're doing, and both of you be patient." On the drive home, Kira was quiet. When they pulled up to the farm, she finally spoke. "Why do humans help?" she asked. "You and the priest. Why risk so much for strangers?" Jake thought about his mother, about the lessons she taught him, about choosing kindness even when it was hard. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "Because if we don't help each other, what's the point of anything?" Kira smiled, that expression that made her look less alien and more like family. "Velen believes same thing," she said. "We are not so different." "No," Jake agreed. "I guess we're not." Inside the house, Nix and Sarah were asleep on the couch, curled together like puppies. Kira covered them with a blanket and sat beside them, stroking their hair. Jake watched them and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. 3 weeks passed since Jake and Kira visited Father Peter. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Kira's English improved every day. The children laughed more often. Sarah was completely healthy now, and Nix had started drawing pictures of the farm, showing them to Jake with pride. Jake had almost let himself believe everything would be fine. Father Peter said the paperwork was moving forward. The refugee application was being processed by contacts who understood the situation. It was just a matter of time. But time was something they did not have as much of as they thought. It started with a phone call. Jake was in the barn fixing a broken tool when his phone rang. It was Henry Cooper, his neighbor from 2 miles down the road. "Hey Jake, just wanted to give you a heads up," Henry said. "Patrol vehicles were at my place this morning asking questions. Something about strange lights in the area a few weeks back. They're checking all the farms." Jake's blood went cold. "What did you tell them?" Told them I didn't see anything unusual. But they're being thorough. They'll probably come by your place too. Thanks for letting me know, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. He hung up and ran to the house. Kira was in the kitchen teaching Sarah how to make bread. The peaceful scene made what Jake had to say even harder. We have a problem, he said. The patrol is coming. They're checking farms in the area. Kira's face went pale, her skin losing its glow. When? I don't know. Could be today, could be tomorrow. We need to be ready. For the next hour, they prepared. Jake showed Kira and the children a hiding spot in the basement, behind a false wall he had built years ago for storing valuables. It was cramped and dark, but it was hidden. If they come, you go down there immediately, Jake said. Don't make any noise. Don't come out until I say it's safe. Kira practiced with the children, timing how fast they could get from the kitchen to the basement. Nix looked scared and Sarah started crying. Kira held them both and spoke softly in their language, trying to comfort them. Jake felt sick. These children should not have to hide like criminals. They had done nothing wrong. They were just trying to survive. That evening, Jake could not eat dinner. He kept watching the road through the window, waiting for patrol vehicles to appear. Kira sat beside him, holding his hand. He could feel her trembling. If they find us, what happens to you? Kira asked quietly. I'll probably go to jail, Jake said honestly. They'll take the farm, everything. Then we should leave. Tonight. We can hide somewhere else. Jake shook his head. There's nowhere to go. They're checking everywhere. And Father Peter says the paperwork is almost done. We just need a little more time. How much time? He said another week, maybe 2. Then you'll have temporary protected status. You'll be legal. Kira looked at her children. 2 weeks is a long time. I know, Jake said. But we've made it this far. We can make it a little longer. That night, Jake barely slept. Every sound made him jump. The wind rattling the windows. A coyote howling in the distance. The house settling. Each noise could be the patrol arriving. Morning came, gray and cold. Jake did his farm chores like normal, trying to act like everything was fine. He fed the goats and collected eggs from the chickens. The chickens still remembered Kira from when she stayed in their coop. They followed her around when she was outside like she was part of their flock. Around noon, Jake saw dust rising from the road. Vehicles were coming. 3 of them, black and official looking. Kira, he shouted toward the house. Now go now. He heard footsteps running inside. The basement door closing. Then silence. Jake walked out to meet the patrol as they pulled into his driveway. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He forced himself to breathe normally, to look calm. 3 vehicles meant this was serious. Usually, patrol checks were done by 1 or 2 officers. 3 vehicles meant they were looking for something specific. The doors opened and 6 officers stepped out. They all wore dark uniforms and carried weapons at their sides. One of them, a woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, she asked. That's me, Jake said. What can I help you with? I'm Captain Linda Hayes. We're conducting searches in this area following reports of unregistered alien activity. We need to search your property. Jake's mouth went dry. Alien activity. I haven't seen any aliens around here. Captain Hayes pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a screen. It displayed a map with glowing dots. This shows energy signatures from about 4 weeks ago. A small craft crashed somewhere in this area. We've been tracking it, and the signature points to somewhere near your farm. Jake tried to look confused. A crash? I didn't see anything crash. The crash would have been at night, Hayes said. Small ship, not much bigger than a car. Would have made a bright flash when it came down. Jake remembered that night. He had been asleep and had not seen anything. But Kira had told him that was when they crashed. The timing matched perfectly. Sorry, Captain, Jake said. I sleep pretty heavy. If something crashed nearby, I didn't notice. Hayes studied his face for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable. Nevertheless, we have authorization to search the property. It's standard procedure. She held up her tablet, showing the search warrant. It was all official and legal. Jake had no choice, of course, he said, stepping aside. Search wherever you need to. The 6 officers spread out. 2 went to the barn. 2 headed toward the chicken coop. Hayes and 1 other officer walked toward the house. Jake followed Hayes, his mind racing. The hiding spot in the basement was good, but was it good enough? Would their scanning equipment detect heat signatures or breathing? Would Sarah make a noise? She was only 4 years old. Could she stay quiet that long? Hayes entered the house without knocking. She looked around the kitchen, the living room, her eyes taking in every detail. She was thorough and professional. This was someone who knew her job well. "You live alone, Mr. Morrison?" she asked. "Yes," Jake said. "Just me. Must get lonely out here. I like the quiet." Hayes walked through each room, opening closets and looking under beds. The other officers scanned with some kind of device, watching a screen for readings. They reached the spare bedroom where Kira and the children had been sleeping. Jake had cleaned it that morning, putting away the extra blankets and closing the curtains. But there were small signs if you looked carefully. 3 water glasses on the nightstand, a child's drawing on the desk, a strand of blue-gray hair on the pillow. Hayes picked up the drawing. It showed Jake's house with stick figures in front. 1 tall figure and 3 smaller ones with large heads. "Nice drawing," Hayes said, her voice carefully neutral. "You have kids?" "My nephew visits sometimes," Jake lied. "He likes to draw." Hayes set the drawing down and moved to the closet. She opened it and looked inside. Jake held his breath. Kira's torn clothes were hidden in the back, but if Hayes looked carefully enough, the radio on Hayes's belt crackled. "Captain, we found something in the chicken coop." Hayes turned and walked quickly out of the room. Jake followed, his heart sinking. What had they found? Outside, the 2 officers from the coop were waiting. One of them held up a piece of fabric. It was torn and dirty, clearly not human-made. The material shimmered slightly in the light, just like Kira's skin. "Found this in the corner," the officer said. "Looks like alien clothing, and there are signs someone was living in there recently. The chickens are disturbed, and there's evidence of recent cleaning." Hayes examined the fabric. "How recent?" "Hard to say exactly. Could be a few weeks. Could be a few days." Hayes looked at Jake. "You sure you haven't seen any aliens, Mr. Morrison?" "I told you I haven't seen anything," Jake said, but he could hear his voice shaking. Hayes nodded slowly. "Check the barn and the fields. Look for any other evidence." The officer spread out again. Jake stood next to Hayes, feeling trapped. She was watching him closely now, studying his reactions. "Mr. Morrison, if you're hiding something, now would be the time to tell me. The penalties for harboring unregistered aliens are severe. Prison time, fines, loss of property." Jake met her eyes. "I understand the law, Captain. Do you? Because a lot of people think they're doing the right thing by helping aliens in trouble. They think they're being compassionate. But the law exists for a reason. We need to control who comes to Earth and why." "Even refugees?" Jake asked before he could stop himself. Hayes's expression changed slightly. "Refugees have a legal process they can follow. They don't need to hide." "That process takes months," Jake said. "What are they supposed to do while they wait?" "Starve?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You sound like someone who's thought about this a lot." Before Jake could respond, they heard a sound from inside the house. A cough, small and quickly muffled, but definitely there. Both Hayes and Jake turned toward the house. The other officers heard it too and moved toward the door, hands on their weapons. "Wait here," Hayes told Jake, but he followed anyway. Inside, the officers moved through the rooms, listening. The sound had come from somewhere downstairs, near the basement. Hayes reached the basement door and opened it. She shined a flashlight down the stairs. "Anyone down there?" "Silence. This is the patrol. If anyone is hiding, come out now. We will use force if necessary." Still silence. Hayes started down the stairs and Jake's heart nearly stopped. This was it. They would find Kira and the children. Everything would be over. But then another sound came from upstairs. Footsteps running. Hayes spun around and ran back up, her officers following. Jake looked down the basement stairs and saw Kira in the shadows holding her children. She looked terrified. Jake put a finger to his lips, begging her to stay quiet and still. Upstairs, the officers were searching the bedrooms again. Then Hayes emerged into the hallway and Jake saw what she was holding. Little Sarah. The girl must have panicked and run from the hiding spot. Now she was in Hayes's arms, trembling and crying. Nix came running from another room, trying to reach his sister. Kira appeared at the top of the basement stairs, no longer hiding. All the officers raised their weapons, pointing them at Kira. Hayes held Sarah protectively, but her own weapon was drawn now, pointed at the alien mother. Jake stepped between them, his hands up. "Don't shoot." "They're refugees." "They're not dangerous." Hayes stared at the scene before her. Kira, thin and scared, reaching desperately for her children. Nix crying and trying to get past the officers, Sarah shaking with fear, and Jake standing in the middle trying to protect them all. The moment stretched out tense and fragile. Everything hung in balance. One wrong move and someone would get hurt. The silence in the house was broken only by Sarah's crying. Captain Linda Hayes stood with her weapon pointed at Kira, but her expression was complicated. Not angry, not cold. Something else. Conflicted. Jake kept his hands up, his body between the officers and Kira. "Please," he said. "Just listen for a minute. They're not criminals. They're running from war." "Step aside, Mr. Morrison," Hayes said firmly. "You're under arrest for harboring unregistered aliens." "They're children," Jake said desperately. "Look at them. They're just scared kids." Hayes looked at Sarah in her arms. The little girl had stopped struggling and was just crying softly, her large eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Hayes with that universal expression of a child who wanted her mother. Something in Hayes's face changed. The hard professional mask cracked slightly. "Stand down," Hayes said quietly to her officers. "Captain," one of them asked, confused. "I said stand down. Lower your weapons." The officers hesitated, then slowly lowered their guns. Kira immediately ran forward and Hayes handed Sarah to her. The alien mother clutched both her children, speaking rapidly in her own language, checking them for injuries. Hayes turned to Jake. "How long have they been here?" "About a month," Jake admitted. There was no point in lying now. "And you've been hiding them this whole time?" "Yes." Hayes looked at Kira and her children. Kira was kneeling on the floor, her arms wrapped around Nix and Sarah, her whole body shaking. The children were crying into her shoulders. "Tell me their story," Hayes said. "All of it." Jake told her everything. The night he found them in the chicken coop. How Kira had escaped from her dying world with her children. The crashed ship. The weeks of hiding and fear. Father Peter and the refugee application that was almost approved. Hayes listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I've seen the reports about the Valen refugees, about what happened to their world. The Kreth Empire destroyed it completely. Millions dead. The survivors are scattered across the galaxy." "Then you understand," Jake said. "They have nowhere else to go." Hayes looked at her officers. They were young, following her lead, waiting for orders. She turned back to Jake and Kira. "I became a patrol officer to protect people," Hayes said slowly. "To keep Earth safe from real threats. Not to hunt down mothers and children running from genocide." One of the officers stepped forward. "Captain, regulations require us to report all unregistered aliens immediately." "I know the regulations," Hayes said sharply. "I also know that sometimes regulations conflict with what's right." She walked over to Kira, who tensed, pulling her children closer. Hayes knelt down to be at eye level with her. "Do you understand English?" Hayes asked gently. Kira nodded. "Yes, some. I'm not going to hurt you," Hayes said. "But I need to know. Are you running from anyone? Any crimes? Anything that would make you a danger?" "No," Kira said firmly. "Only run from war. Only want safety for children." Hayes studied her face for a moment. Then she stood and turned to her officers. "Scan complete. No unregistered aliens detected on this property. Must have been a false reading on our sensors." The officers stared at her. "But Captain, we just—" "That's my official report," Hayes said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "The fabric we found in the chicken coop is old. Probably been there for months. Could be from anywhere. We found no evidence of recent alien presence." "Captain Hayes," another officer protested. "We can't just ignore—" "You can and you will," Hayes said firmly. "Unless you want to explain to your families why you helped arrest a mother and her children who are running from war crimes. Unless you want to be the people who sent them back to die." The officers looked at each other. One of them, a younger man with kind eyes, spoke up. "I didn't sign up to hurt refugees, Captain." "Me neither," said another. Hayes nodded. "Good, then we're all on the same page. We found nothing. We're leaving." She turned to Jake. "You have about 2 weeks, Mr. Morrison. After that, I'll have to file my report and I won't be able to protect you anymore. Whatever you're doing to get them legal status, finish it fast." "Father Peter says the paperwork should be done by then," Jake said. Hayes nodded. "Father Peter, I should have guessed. That man has helped more people than anyone knows." She pulled a card from her pocket and handed it to Jake. "This is my personal number. If you run into any trouble before the paperwork comes through, call me. I'll see what I can do." "Why are you helping us?" Jake asked. Hayes looked at Kira and her children again. Because I have a daughter about Sarah's age. And I'd hope if something terrible happened, if we had to run, someone would help us. Someone would see us as people first, not just aliens breaking rules. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. You did a good thing, Mr. Morrison. Not a legal thing, but a good thing. Sometimes those are different. The patrol officers filed out. Jake watched through the window as their vehicles drove away, dust rising behind them. Only when they were completely out of sight did he let himself breathe. Kira came to stand beside him, still holding both children. She let us go, Kira said, her voice full of wonder. Why? Because she's a good person, Jake said. Because she knows the difference between law and justice. Kira placed her hand on Jake's arm, and he felt that warm sensation again. But this time it was different. Stronger. It felt like family, like belonging, like home. The next 2 weeks passed quickly. Father Peter called with good news. The refugee application had been approved. Kira and her children would receive temporary protected status, which meant they could stay on Earth legally while their permanent application was processed. They would get identification papers, work permits, and access to education for the children. On the day the papers arrived, Father Peter came to the farm himself to deliver them. He handed the documents to Kira with a smile. Welcome to Earth officially, he said. Kira looked at the papers with tears in her eyes. After everything she had been through, after all the fear and hiding, she was finally safe. Her children were finally safe. Thank you, she said to Father Peter. Then she turned to Jake. Thank you, Jake smiled. You don't have to thank me. You're family now. And it was true. Over the past months, they had become a family. Not by blood or even by species, but by choice. By standing together when it mattered. By protecting each other. Captain Hayes came by a week later, off duty and in civilian clothes. She brought gifts for the children, toys and books. She also brought news. The patrol is officially closing the investigation, she said. No evidence of illegal alien activity in the area. You're clear. Jake shook her hand. Thank you, Captain. For everything. Call me Linda, she said with a smile. And thank you for reminding me why I took this job in the first place. Life settled into a new normal. Kira got a job at the Federation Cultural Center in town, helping newly arrived aliens adjust to Earth. Her ability to speak multiple languages and her own experience as a refugee made her perfect for the work. Nix and Sarah enrolled in the local school, which had special programs for alien children. They made friends quickly, their empathic abilities helping them understand and connect with others. Jake's farm became known as a safe place in the quiet way that important things often are. Father Peter would sometimes send people who needed help, refugees who had just arrived and needed a place to stay for a few days. Jake always said yes. The spare bedroom was always ready. One evening, 6 months after that first night in the chicken coop, Jake and Kira sat on the porch watching the sunset. Nix and Sarah were playing in the yard, chasing each other and laughing. The sound of children's laughter had become common around the farm, and Jake loved it. Do you ever think about your old world? Jake asked. Kira was quiet for a moment. Every day, she said. I think about what we lost, but also about what we found. Here, with you. She took his hand, and Jake felt that now familiar warmth, but he was starting to realize it was not just her empathic ability. It was also just care, just love in its purest form. This is home now, Kira said. Earth is home. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Good, because you belong here. Above them, the Montana sky turned orange and pink and purple as the sun set. Somewhere out there, the galaxy turned. Empires rose and fell. Species met and clashed and learned from each other. But here, on a small farm in the middle of nowhere, something simple and profound had happened. A stranger had been welcomed. A family had been saved. And in the process, everyone involved had learned what it truly meant to be human. Not human in the biological sense. Human in the way that mattered. Kind, compassionate. Willing to help even when it cost something. Willing to do what was right even when it was hard. The Valan had a saying that Kira taught Jake. It translated roughly to, the heart recognizes family before the eyes do. Jake had not understood it at first. But now he did. Family was not about biology or species or even about law. It was about who you chose to stand beside, who you chose to protect, who you chose to love. And as Jake sat there with Kira beside him and her children playing in the yard, he knew he had found his family. Against all odds, across all the vastness of space, they had found each other, and that was the most human thing of all.